The chill of the city seemed to seep into Alara Vance's bones, a constant companion since the day her world had fractured. Her parents, gone too soon, had left a void that her grandmother, bless her resilient heart, had tried to fill. But then came the blow that shattered what little remained of their fragile peace. Nora, her bright, vivacious younger sister, a university student with dreams as vast as the summer sky, had been stolen from them, her life brutally extinguished. The police had called it a homicide, a word so clinical, so cold, it failed to capture the inferno of grief and rage that consumed Alara. She was a designer, a creator of beauty, yet her life was now marred by an ugly, indelible stain. In the blur of those first days, amidst the hushed condolences and the sterile environment of the police station, a photograph had been shown to her, a grainy image of a man, a fleeting presence near the scene of the crime. His face was obscured, but a sharp aristocratic profile, a certain angle of his jaw, had snagged in her memory, a fishhook in her reeling mind. Life, however, has a cruel way of marching on. Ilara, still numb, still grappling with the gaping wound of Nora's absence, had to return to Zenith Corp. It was there, in the sleek, impersonal confines of a conference room, that the fishhook tightened. The new CEO, Ethan Kingsley, was addressing the senior staff. He was everything one might expect. Impeccably dressed, radiating an aura of quiet power, his voice a low, confident timbre that commanded attention. But it wasn't his commanding presence or his piercing gaze that held Ilara captive. It was his profile. As he turned to address a manager, the light caught the sharp line of his jaw, the elegant sweep of his nose, the way his dark hair was meticulously styled back from his temple. It was him, the man from the photograph. The resemblance was uncanny, a chilling echo that resonated deep within her. Her breath hitched, her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Could it be? This man, this titan of industry, this impossibly handsome, enigmatic figure. Could he be connected to something so heinous, so vile? The thought was a serpent, coiling around her, its venomous whisper sowing seeds of terror and disbelief. The air in the room grew thick, suffocating. Ethan Kingsley's eyes, cool and assessing, swept across the room, and for a fleeting second, they met hers. There was an unnerving stillness in their depths, a glacial calm that sent a shiver down her spine. He was dangerous. Her instincts screamed. Whether he was the man in the photo or not, he exuded an air of controlled power that felt utterly formidable. The meeting concluded, a blur of strategic jargon and corporate platitudes that had barely registered. Alara felt disoriented, her mind a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. She had to act. The image of Nora's lifeless body, a grotesque parody of her vibrant sister, flashed before her eyes, fueling a desperate resolve. With trembling hands, she made a copy of the police photograph, the one she had discreetly photographed with her phone, and, under the guise of an anonymous tip, submitted it to the lead detective on Nora's case. She knew it was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but she couldn't ignore the chilling coincidence. The weight of her suspicion was a physical burden, pressing down on her, making each breath a conscious effort. She needed to confide in someone, to voice the terrifying thoughts that were threatening to consume her. Chloe, her closest colleague and friend, a bubbly, warm-hearted woman who had been a pillar of support since Nora's death, met her for coffee after work. The steam rising from their cups did little to dispel the chill that had settled in Alara's soul. "Chloe," she began, her voice barely a whisper, I think the new CEO might be involved in Nora's death." Chloe's eyes widened, her cheerful demeanor instantly evaporating, replaced by a look of shocked concern. Alara recounted the uncanny resemblance, the unsettling feeling Ethan Kingsley evoked in her. Chloe listened patiently, her expression a mixture of disbelief and sympathy. "Ilara, are you sure?" she asked gently. "It could just be a coincidence. People who look alike, you know?" Ilara shook her head, a knot of certainty tightening in her gut. "It's more than that, Chloe. There's something about him. Something cold. Something hidden." Chloe, ever pragmatic, urged caution. "Be careful, Ilara. Accusing someone like Ethan Kingsley without concrete proof, it could destroy your career, or worse." Ilara knew Chloe was right, but the image of Nora and the burning need for justice overshadowed any concern for her own well-being. She had already requested 2 days off to arrange Nora's funeral, a cremation, as Nora had once whimsically wished, followed by interment at the city cemetery. As she stood before the small urn, a profound vow took root in her heart. She would find the monster who did this. She would not rest until Nora's spirit could find peace. Returning to the oppressive quiet of her apartment, now shared only with her aging grandmother, Mrs. Gable, the weight of her loss and her burgeoning suspicion felt almost unbearable. Mrs. Gable, frail but fiercely protective, worried endlessly about Ilara, her grief for Nora, mingling with a deep-seated fear for her remaining granddaughter. Ilara tried to shield her from the darker aspects of her investigation, focusing instead on the upcoming tasks at Zenith Corp. She had been assigned a significant project, designing the jewelry for the company's upcoming summer collection. It was a prestigious opportunity, a chance to showcase her talent on a grand scale. And it meant more meetings, more interactions with Ethan Kingsley. The thought sent a jolt of apprehension through her, but also a grim sense of purpose. This proximity, however unsettling, might offer her a chance to observe him, to glean some clue, any clue, that might confirm or dispel her horrifying suspicion. The first project meeting was tense. Ilara presented her initial concepts, her voice carefully modulated to betray none of the turmoil raging within her. Ethan Kingsley listened intently, his expression unreadable. His critiques were sharp, insightful, revealing a surprising depth of knowledge about design. He set a demanding deadline, preliminary sketches in 10 days. "This collection is pivotal, Ms. Vance," he stated, his gaze unwavering. "Succeed, and it will be a significant step for your career, and for Zenith." His words were a challenge, an implicit warning. Ilara met his gaze, her own resolve hardening. "I understand, Mr. Kingsley. I won't disappoint." Despite the undercurrent of fear and suspicion, a spark of professional pride ignited within her. She would not let him, or her grief, sabotage this opportunity. She would pour every ounce of her talent and energy into this project, even as she navigated the treacherous waters of her secret investigation. The duality of her existence was exhausting. The meticulous designer by day, the grieving sister, and amateur detective by night. The 10 days that followed were a relentless blur of caffeine-fueled nights and anxiety-ridden days. Ilara threw herself into the summer collection, sketching intricate designs inspired by sun-drenched landscapes and the vibrant hues of tropical flowers. Each piece was a delicate dance of precious metals and gemstones, a testament to her skill and her desperate need for distraction. But even as she lost herself in the creative process, the shadow of Nora's death and Ethan Kingsley's unsettling presence loomed large. She found herself scrutinizing every detail of his demeanor during their brief interactions, every intonation in his voice, searching for a flicker of something, guilt, malice, anything, that might betray him. But he remained an enigma, his composure impeccable, his professionalism unwavering. His cool, appraising gaze often made her skin crawl, yet there were moments, fleeting and disconcerting, when she caught a glimpse of something else in his eyes. A flicker of interest, perhaps. Or was it merely the calculated assessment of a superior evaluating an employee? She couldn't be sure, and the uncertainty gnawed at her. Her only solace was Mrs. Gable, whose quiet strength was a constant source of comfort. Ilara made it a point to cook for her every evening, the simple ritual of preparing and sharing a meal a small anchor in the storm of her emotions. She installed a security camera system in their small apartment, a precaution born of a growing paranoia, and gently dissuaded Mrs. Gable from using the stove when she wasn't home, her heart aching at the older woman's increasing frailty. The investigation into Nora's murder, however, had stalled. Each visit to the police station was met with a frustrating lack of progress. The detective assigned to the case, a jaded, world-weary man, seemed increasingly dismissive of her concerns. "Miss Vance," he'd said during her last visit, his tone tinged with impatience, "we're doing everything we can. As for that photo you sent, it's likely just a case of mistaken identity. People look alike all the time." His words felt like a dousing of cold water on her fragile hope, reinforcing her fear that Nora's case was being quietly swept under the rug, perhaps due to the influence of powerful, unseen forces. Was Ethan Kingsley one of those forces? The thought chilled her to the core. The deadline for the preliminary sketches arrived all too soon. Ilara, her portfolio clutched tightly in her hand, took the elevator to the top floor of the Zenith Corp tower, her heart pounding a nervous rhythm against her ribs. Ethan Kingsley's office was a testament to minimalist power: sleek, modern furniture, a panoramic view of the city, and an almost sterile tidiness. He was seated behind a large mahogany desk, his attention focused on a tablet. He looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Vance," he acknowledged, his voice cool and impersonal. "You have the sketches?" Ilara nodded, her throat suddenly dry. She laid her portfolio on his desk, her hands trembling slightly. He opened it, his gaze sweeping over her designs with an intensity that made her feel exposed. The silence stretched, taut and unnerving. Then, a flicker of something, approval, crossed his features. "Impressive," he said, his voice still devoid of warmth, but with a subtle shift in tone. "Your interpretation of the summer theme is innovative." He pointed to a particularly intricate necklace design. "This piece, in particular, has potential." He then proceeded to offer a series of incisive critiques, his observations astute and to the point. He wasn't just a businessman. He understood the artistry, the craftsmanship involved. "Refine these based on my feedback," he instructed, "and prepare a more detailed presentation. If this collection is as successful as I anticipate, it will be a cornerstone of our presentation at the upcoming industry conference." Ilara felt a surge of relief, quickly followed by a renewed sense of pressure. This was her chance, her opportunity to prove herself, to rise above the grief and the fear that threatened to engulf her. But even as she absorbed his professional feedback, the image of his profile, the chilling resemblance to the man in the police photograph, remained etched in her mind. He was an enigma, a dangerous paradox, a discerning patron of her art, and potentially the architect of her deepest sorrow. As Ilara left Zenith Corp that evening, her mind a whirlwind of design concepts and unsettling suspicions, she found herself stranded. A flat tire. Just what she needed. As she stood by her car, contemplating the hassle of calling for roadside assistance, a sleek, black Rolls-Royce Ghost purred to a stop beside her. The window glided down, revealing Ethan Kingsley's assistant, a young, efficient man named Ben. "Ms. Vance, Mr. Kingsley noticed your predicament. He asked me to offer you a ride." Ilara was taken aback. It was an unexpected gesture, almost considerate. Given her suspicions, accepting a ride from anyone connected to Ethan felt like stepping into a lion's den, yet the alternative was a long, frustrating wait. Swallowing her apprehension, she accepted. The interior of the Rolls-Royce was opulent, the scent of expensive leather, and a faint, almost imperceptible trace of Ethan's signature cologne, sandalwood and bergamot, filling the air. Ben was polite but reserved, and the drive to her modest neighborhood was mostly silent. He dropped her at the entrance to her street, the imposing vehicle looking utterly out of place amidst the small, older houses. The next day at work, Alara found her car keys on her desk with a note. "Your vehicle has been repaired. The bill is settled. EK." She stared at the note, a mixture of surprise and unease swirling within her. Why was he doing this? Was it a genuine act of kindness, or something more calculated, a way to disarm her, to lull her into a false sense of security? The ambiguity of his actions was maddening. That afternoon, another project meeting with Ethan. He was his usual self, cool, composed, utterly professional. His critiques were demanding, pushing her to refine her designs, to elevate them to a higher standard. There was no mention of the car, no hint of personal connection. He was a fortress, impenetrable, and inscrutable. Lunchtime found Ilara rushing home to share a meal with Mrs. Gable. The old woman, her eyes clouded with worry, fussed over Ilara, her frail hands patting Ilara's arm. "You're working too hard, child," she fretted. "And all this business with poor Nora. I worry you'll do something rash." Ilara forced a reassuring smile. "I'm fine, Grandma. Just busy. And I promise I won't do anything reckless. I just want justice for Nora." But even as she spoke the words, she knew the path to justice was fraught with peril, especially if it led to a man as powerful and enigmatic as Ethan Kingsley. Back at Zenith, the office buzzed with hushed conversations about the CEO. His striking looks, his immense wealth, his almost mythical rise in the business world. He was the subject of endless speculation and admiration among her colleagues. Ilara listened, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. They saw a charismatic leader, a brilliant businessman. She saw a man with a face that haunted her waking nightmares. Yet, despite her fear, despite her suspicion, she couldn't deny a grudging admiration for his intellect, his discerning eye for design, and to her shame, a faint, treacherous stirring of attraction. He was, undeniably, a captivating presence. The thought of him, of the chasm that separated their worlds, of the dark secret that might lie between them, was a constant torment. She found herself increasingly drawn into his orbit, her life a complicated tapestry woven with threads of grief, suspicion, ambition, and a dangerous, unwelcome fascination. The upcoming exhibition loomed, a critical showcase for her designs and Zenith Corp. Ilara poured herself into her work, often staying late, the dimly lit office her sanctuary and her prison. It was during one of these late nights, surrounded by sketches and gemstone samples, that she overheard snippets of conversation from a neighboring department. They spoke of Ethan Kingsley's lineage, heir to the formidable Kingsley Empire, a dynasty built on old money and shrewd investments. He'd been educated abroad, in England, carving out his own success before returning to take the helm of Zenith, a key acquisition for the larger Kingsley holdings. The more she learned, the more untouchable he seemed, the more audacious her suspicions felt. How could she, a junior designer from a modest background, possibly challenge a man of his stature, a man who could likely make problems and people disappear with a single phone call? One evening, as Ilara and a few dedicated colleagues burned the midnight oil, Ethan Kingsley himself made an unexpected appearance. He surveyed their efforts, a rare hint of approval in his eyes. "You've all been working exceptionally hard," he said, his voice smoother than usual. "Let me treat you to dinner." The others were thrilled, eager for a chance to dine with the enigmatic CEO. Ilara, however, declined. "Thank you, Mr. Kingsley, but I need to get home to my grandmother." His gaze lingered on her for a moment, unreadable, before he nodded curtly and led the others out. Relief washed over Ilara. The thought of sharing a meal with him, of trying to maintain a facade of normalcy while her mind raced with suspicion, was unbearable. She hurried home to Mrs. Gable, the image of his fleeting, unreadable expression replaying in her mind. Their small apartment, though humble, felt like a haven. The simple meal they shared, the quiet conversation, the comforting presence of her grandmother, these were the anchors that kept her tethered to sanity. Mrs. Gable, bless her heart, lived a quiet life, her days punctuated by the flickering images on the television screen, her only companion when Ilara was at work. The love between them was a fragile, precious thing, a lifeline in the turbulent sea of Ilara's emotions. Later that night, as Ilara sat at her small desk, reviewing her designs, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Hesitantly, she opened the message. "Why didn't you join us for dinner? E.K." Her heart leapt into her throat. Ethan Kingsley. Texting her. How had he even gotten her personal number? She typed a polite, if slightly flustered, reply. "I had to get home to care for my grandmother. Thank you again for the invitation." His reply was instantaneous. "Family is important." And then, another message. "Lunch tomorrow. My treat. Ben will pick you up at noon." It wasn't a question. It was a command, albeit couched in the guise of an invitation. Ilara stared at her phone, her mind reeling. Lunch with Ethan Kingsley. Alone. The thought filled her with a potent cocktail of dread and a strange, unnerving flicker of anticipation. This was an opportunity, perhaps, to observe him more closely, to probe, however subtly, for any chink in his armor. But it was also a dangerous game, a dance with a man who held immense power, a man who might be connected to her sister's death. The next day, Ilara dressed with meticulous care, choosing a simple, elegant dress that projected professionalism, yet hinted at her artistic sensibility. She felt a nervous flutter in her stomach, a sensation she hadn't experienced in years. Ben, punctual as ever, arrived in the familiar Rolls-Royce, his demeanor impeccably polite. The restaurant was one of the city's most exclusive establishments, a hushed sanctuary of understated luxury. Ethan was already there, seated at a secluded table, the city skyline a breathtaking panorama behind him. He rose as she approached, his eyes taking in her appearance with an intensity that made her blush. "Ms. Vance," he greeted, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Please call me Ilara." "Ethan, then." The meal was an exercise in controlled conversation. Ilara found herself surprisingly at ease, or perhaps it was the fine wine and the exquisite food that dulled the edge of her anxiety. Ethan was a surprisingly engaging conversationalist, his interests ranging from art and literature to global economics. He asked about her background, her inspirations, her ambitions. He listened intently, his gaze never wavering, making her feel, for a brief, intoxicating moment, like the most important person in the world. Then he shifted the conversation. "My mother's birthday is approaching," he said, his tone softening almost imperceptibly. "She's a woman of discerning taste, particularly when it comes to jewelry. I'd like you to design a bespoke piece for her, something unique, something that reflects her personality." Ilara was stunned. This was a significant commission, a gesture of immense trust. I'd be honored, Ethan," she stammered, her mind racing. This was an unprecedented opportunity to gain insight into his world, his family. Perhaps even a chance to get closer to the truth. Excellent, he said, that faint smile returning. I'll arrange for you to meet her. She can tell you about her preferences herself. The prospect was daunting, yet undeniably alluring. As the lunch concluded and Ben drove her back to her modest apartment, Alara couldn't shake the feeling that she was being drawn deeper into Ethan Kingsley's enigmatic orbit, her fate inextricably linked with his, for better or for worse. The lines between suspicion and a dangerous, burgeoning attraction were becoming increasingly blurred, and Alara knew, with a chilling certainty, that she was playing with fire. A few days later, armed with her sketchbook and a portfolio of preliminary ideas for Mrs. Kingsley's piece, Alara found herself once again ascending to the top floor of Zenith Corp. As she waited in the plush anteroom of Ethan's office, the door opened and a woman emerged. She was strikingly beautiful, exuding an air of effortless sophistication and confidence. Her designer clothes were impeccable, her bearing regal. Ben, ever present, introduced them. Alara Vance, this is Vivian Holloway. Vivian is the CEO of Chino Inc., one of our key strategic partners. Vivian, Alara is one of our most promising jewelry designers. Vivian Holloway's smile was cool, appraising. A pleasure, Ms. Vance, she said, her voice melodious, but with an undercurrent of steel. Ethan has mentioned your talent. Alara felt a pang of something akin to intimidation. Vivian Holloway was clearly a woman of substance, a peer in Ethan's world, a world so far removed from Alara's own. There was an unspoken rivalry in the air, a subtle tension that made Alara acutely aware of the chasm that separated her from these titans of industry. When Vivian had departed, Ethan called Alara into his office. He seemed unfazed by Vivian's presence, his focus entirely on the task at hand. Alara presented her initial concepts for his mother's birthday gift. He examined them with his usual critical eye, offering insightful suggestions, his passion for design once again evident. My mother will appreciate this level of thoughtfulness, he commented, a rare note of warmth in his voice. This is an important commission, Alara, not just for me, but for your portfolio. It could open many doors. The praise, coming from him, was both validating and unnerving. Alara left his office feeling a renewed sense of purpose, but also a growing unease about the complexities of Ethan's world, a world populated by powerful, sophisticated women like Vivian Holloway. Back in the quiet sanctuary of her apartment, Alara found solace in the familiar routines. Mrs. Gable, sensing her granddaughter's inner turmoil, offered quiet words of encouragement. And then there was Shadow, a scrawny stray cat that had started appearing on their doorstep a few weeks ago. Alara, initially hesitant, had begun leaving out food and water. Now, Shadow was a regular visitor, a silent, furry confidant who would curl up at her feet as she sketched late into the night, his purrs a comforting rumble in the stillness. He was a small, unexpected joy in her otherwise complicated life. Life settled into a precarious rhythm. The intense demands of her work at Zenith, the quiet evenings with Mrs. Gable and Shadow, and the ever-present, gnawing anxiety about Nora's unsolved murder. The police investigation seemed to have hit a dead end, each inquiry met with polite but firm dismissals. Alara felt increasingly isolated in her quest for justice. One Friday evening, Chloe, ever the social butterfly, persuaded Alara to join a group of colleagues for drinks at a trendy downtown bar. You need a break, Alara, Chloe insisted. All work and no play will turn you into a hermit. Reluctantly, Alara agreed. She wasn't much of a drinker, and the loud, crowded atmosphere of the bar was a stark contrast to her usual quiet evenings. But Chloe was right. She needed a distraction, however fleeting. She nursed a glass of wine, trying to engage in the light-hearted banter, but her mind kept drifting back to Nora, to Ethan, to the tangled web of secrets and suspicions that ensnared her. As the evening wore on, their department head, Mr. Quain, a jovial, slightly over-enthusiastic manager, insisted on introducing them to some of the company's top executives who were gathered in a plush VIP lounge. Ilara, feeling increasingly uncomfortable, tried to demur, but Quan was insistent. The VIP lounge was a haze of expensive perfume, cigar smoke, and the low murmur of powerful men discussing business and pleasure. And there, at the center of it all, holding court with effortless grace, was Ethan Kingsley. He was with Vivian Holloway and several autres, her high-profile figures. His eyes, cool and assessing, flickered towards their group, and Ilara felt a familiar jolt of awareness. He seemed displeased by their intrusion, his expression hardening almost imperceptibly. Quan, oblivious, launched into a fawning introduction. The air crackled with unspoken tensions. Some of the men in Ethan's group eyed Ilara with a predatory interest that made her skin crawl. Ethan, however, remained aloof, his gaze unreadable. After a few strained pleasantries, he rose abruptly. "Gentlemen, Ms. Holloway, if you'll excuse me, I have an early start." With a curt nod, he departed, effectively ending the impromptu gathering. Ilara, who had uncharacteristically consumed more wine than she was used to, felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. She stumbled slightly, reaching out to steady herself. Before she could fall, a strong hand gripped her arm. Ethan. He hadn't left after all. "You've had too much to drink," he stated, his voice low and firm, a hint of disapproval in his tone. Without another word, he steered her out of the bar, his grip surprisingly gentle, yet undeniably firm. He led her to his waiting Rolls-Royce, opened the door, and helped her inside. The familiar scent of sandalwood and bergamot enveloped her, a strangely comforting sensation, despite her embarrassment and the lingering effects of the wine. He drove in silence, the city lights blurring past. Ilara, mortified by her lack of composure, mumbled an apology. "It's fine," he said, his voice softer now. "Just be more careful next time." He pulled up outside her apartment building, the imposing car once again drawing curious glances from the late-night stragglers. He walked her to her door, waiting until she had fumbled with her keys and safely unlocked it. "Get some rest, Ilara," he said, his gaze lingering on her face for a moment before he turned and walked away. As she leaned against the closed door, her heart still thumping from the wine and the unexpected encounter, Ilara couldn't help but feel a strange sense of something. Gratitude? Confusion? He was a paradox, a dangerous enigma, yet in that moment, he had been her protector, her rescuer. The scent of him, faint but distinct, still clung to her, a lingering reminder of his unsettling, undeniable presence in her life. The next morning brought with it a dull headache and a company-wide memo. Zenith Corp would be hosting an employee appreciation gala, a chance for everyone to unwind before the final push for the summer collection launch and the upcoming industry conference. The design department buzzed with excitement. Chloe, already envisioning a new dress, immediately roped Ilara into a shopping trip. "You have to come, Ilara, and you need something stunning. Show them what you're made of." Ilara, still reeling from the previous night's events, was hesitant, but Chloe's infectious enthusiasm was hard to resist. They spent Saturday afternoon browsing boutiques, Chloe chattering excitedly, while Ilara found herself drawn to a simple, elegant white off-the-shoulder gown. It was understated yet sophisticated, a reflection of her own quiet strength. The night of the gala arrived, the grand ballroom transformed into a glittering wonderland. Ilara, in her white gown, her dark hair swept up in a soft chignon, felt a flicker of her old confidence return. She caught her reflection in a mirrored pillar, and was surprised by the woman staring back, poised, elegant, a far cry from the grief-stricken, suspicion-haunted individual she often felt like. As she mingled with her colleagues, she couldn't help but notice Ethan Kingsley's presence. He was, as always, the center of attention, impeccably dressed in a tailored tuxedo, exuding an aura of quiet power. And, Elara realized with a jolt, his eyes kept finding hers across the crowded room. There was an intensity in his gaze, a possessiveness that sent a shiver down her spine. Later, feeling a little overwhelmed by the noise and the crowd, Elara slipped out to the ladies' room to compose herself. As she emerged, a hand shot out, grabbing her arm, pulling her into a dimly lit alcove off the main corridor. It was Ethan. He pressed her against the wall, his body caging hers, his eyes blazing with an emotion she couldn't quite decipher. "Elara," he rasped, his voice thick with an unfamiliar urgency. "I want you. Be mine." Elara stared at him, shocked into silence. His words, raw and possessive, hung in the air between them. Then, a surge of anger, fueled by her grief, her suspicion, her fear, rose within her. "Is this how you operate, Mr. Kingsley?" she retorted, her voice trembling. "Do you think you can just claim people like they're acquisitions for your empire? I am not a prize to be won or a fleeting desire to be sated." His expression hardened, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "I'm not playing games, Elara. I'm offering you something real." "Real?" she scoffed. "Or convenient? I am not interested in being your mistress, or whatever sophisticated term you use for it in your world." He let out a frustrated sigh. "I'll give you 3 days to think about it," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous murmur. 3 days, Elara. Then I expect an answer." Before she could respond, he released her and was gone, disappearing back into the throng of the gala, leaving Elara trembling, her heart pounding, her mind in turmoil. She fled the alcove, fled the gala, the echoes of his words, his ultimatum, ringing in her ears. That night, she sat on the small porch of her apartment, shadow curled at her feet, the cool night air doing little to soothe her agitated spirit. Nora's face swam before her eyes, a painful reminder of all she had lost, of the justice that still eluded her. Ethan Kingsley's proposition felt like a betrayal, a desecration of Nora's memory. How could she even consider being with a man who might be connected to her sister's death? Yet a treacherous part of her, a part she despised, couldn't deny the raw, undeniable chemistry between them, the dangerous allure of his power, his intensity. The next few days at work were an exercise in strained civility. The office buzzed with gossip about the gala, but Elara moved through it all in a daze, her mind consumed by Ethan's ultimatum and her own internal conflict. She confided in Chloe, who listened with wide-eyed disbelief. "He actually said that?" "Be mine." Chloe shook her head. The arrogance. "But Elara, what are you going to do?" Elara sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know, Chloe. I still need to find out what happened to Nora. That's my priority." She made another futile trip to the police station, only to be met with the same frustrating lack of progress. The 3 days passed in a blur of anxiety and indecision. On the third day, as she sat at her desk, trying to focus on her designs, a steaming cup of expensive artisanal coffee appeared before her. She looked up to see Ben, Ethan's assistant, placing it on her desk with a polite nod before retreating. A moment later, her phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "Hope this helps with your focus. E.K." Elara stared at the coffee, a wave of conflicting emotions washing over her. It was a small gesture, yet it felt laden with meaning, a reminder of his presence, his power, his ultimatum. Despite her misgivings, she drank the coffee. It was undeniably delicious. And strangely, it did help her focus. She worked with a renewed intensity, her designs flowing with an almost preternatural ease. That evening, as she was finishing dinner with Mrs. Gable, her phone rang. Ethan. "Come outside," he said, his voice low and commanding. "I need to talk to you." Annoyance warred with a reluctant curiosity. She excused herself, telling Mrs. Gable it was a work call, and stepped out into the cool night air. His Rolls-Royce was parked at the curb, its engine purring softly. He gestured for her to get in. Inside the car, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. He didn't speak for a moment, his gaze fixed on her. Then, he handed her a sleek leather portfolio. "My mother's preferences," he said, his voice neutral. "She's looking forward to seeing your designs." Elara took the portfolio, her fingers brushing against his. A jolt of awareness shot through her. "And your answer?" he asked, his voice dropping to that familiar, dangerous murmur. Elara met his gaze, her heart pounding. I haven't decided yet," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, he nodded slowly. "All right, Elara, I won't rush you, but don't keep me waiting too long." He leaned back, a sigh escaping his lips. "You can go now." Elara, feeling a strange mixture of relief and disappointment, quickly exited the car and hurried back inside, her mind in a turmoil. The next morning, another offering appeared on her desk, a delicate porcelain cup filled with fragrant golden lotus tea from the same exclusive brand as the coffee. Chloe, noticing the offering, raised an eyebrow, a teasing smile playing on her lips. "Someone's persistent," she commented. Elara merely blushed, her confusion deepening. Ethan Kingsley was a man of contradictions, demanding yet considerate, dangerous yet alluring. And she, Elara Vance, was caught in the crosshairs of his attention, her life irrevocably altered by his presence. The days that followed were a strange dance of professional collaboration and unspoken personal tension. Ethan continued his subtle pursuit, small, expensive gifts appearing on her desk, his gaze lingering on her during meetings, his presence a constant, unnerving awareness. Elara, while outwardly maintaining her composure, was a wreck inside. She was working on the bespoke piece for his mother, a task that required her to delve into the Kingsley family's world, a world of immense wealth and privilege that felt both alien and intoxicating. One evening, Ethan invited her to dinner. Not a usiness dinner, but a personal one. He took her to a Michelin-starred restaurant, the ambiance intimate and romantic. Over candlelight and exquisite cuisine, he spoke not of business, but of his life, his travels, his passions. He was charming, witty, surprisingly vulnerable. And then, he presented her with a gift, a delicate diamond bracelet, its brilliance catching the candlelight, a silent testament to his wealth and his intentions. "Elara," he said, his voice low and earnest, "I know you have reservations. I know there's a shadow between us, but I want you by my side. Give me a chance to earn your trust." Elara stared at the bracelet, her heart aching. She was still haunted by Nora's death, by her suspicions of him, yet she couldn't deny the powerful pull he exerted, the genuine emotion she sensed in his words. I need more time, Ethan," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. He nodded, his expression understanding. "Take all the time you need, Elara. I'll wait." But time, it seemed, was a luxury she didn't have. The next afternoon, as she was engrossed in her work, her phone rang. It was Mrs. Gable's neighbor, her voice frantic. "Elara, it's your grandmother. She collapsed. I think it's a stroke." Alara's world tilted on its axis. She raced home, her heart pounding with a desperate fear. The paramedics were already there, working on Mrs. Gable, her frail body still, her face pale. Elara watched in a daze as they rushed her to the hospital. Hours later, a doctor delivered the devastating news. Mrs. Gable had suffered a massive heat stroke, compounded by her underlying frailty. Despite their best efforts, she hadn't made it. Elara felt the last vestiges of her strength crumble. First Nora, now Mrs. Gable. She was truly alone, adrift in a sea of grief. She sat in the sterile waiting room, the diamond bracelet Ethan had given her, feeling heavy and incongruous on her wrist. She looked at the faded photograph of Nora she carried in her wallet, at the wilting rose she had picked from Mrs. Gable's small garden that morning. Her life felt like a wasteland, barren and desolate. As she sat there, numb and broken, a familiar presence appeared beside her. Ethan. Someone at the hospital must have found his number in her phone as her emergency contact. He said nothing, merely sat beside her, his strong arm gently enfolding her shoulders, offering a silent, steadfast support. In that moment of profound desolation, his presence was an unexpected anchor, a fragile lifeline in the overwhelming darkness. The days following Mrs. Gable's funeral were a blur of sorrow and exhaustion. Ethan was a constant, unobtrusive presence, handling the practical arrangements, shielding her from the well-meaning but intrusive inquiries of distant relatives, ensuring she ate, even if it was just a few mouthfuls. He brought her food, sat with her in the oppressive silence of her empty apartment, and simply let her grieve. He didn't press her for answers, didn't mention his earlier proposition. He was just there. A quiet strength in her storm. Elara, though still wary, found herself leaning on him, drawing a strange comfort from his steady presence. She tried to return to work, needing the distraction, the semblance of normalcy. Ethan arranged for a car to pick her up and take her home each day, his concern for her well-being palpable. One evening, he took her to dinner, a quiet, unassuming place, a far cry from the Michelin-starred extravagance of their previous outing. He noticed she wasn't wearing the diamond bracelet. "It's too much, Ethan," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't feel like I deserve it. Not now." He didn't argue, merely nodded in understanding. At a nearby table, Elara spotted Vivian Holloway, dining with a group of associates. Vivian's eyes met Elara's, a flicker of something. Surprise? Disdain? In their depths. Ethan, however, barely acknowledged her. His attention focused solely on Elara. On the drive home, the conversation turned inevitably to Nora. "The police. They're not making any progress," Elara said, her voice thick with frustration and pain. "It's like they've given up." Ethan listened intently, his expression grim. "Tell me everything, Elara," he said, his voice low and serious. "Everything you know, everything you suspect." And so she did. She told him about the grainy photograph, about her chilling certainty that the man in it was him, about her fears that Nora's case was being deliberately sabotaged. She laid bare her darkest suspicions, her deepest fears, half expecting him to recoil, to deny, to dismiss her. Instead, he listened in silence, his gaze unwavering, his expression unreadable. When she had finished, the air in the car was thick with unspoken tension. "I will look into it, Elara," he said finally, his voice firm, authoritative. "I promise you, I will find out what happened to your sister." His words, so simple, so direct, carried an astonishing weight. For the first tea time since Nora's death, Elara felt a fragile flicker of hope ignite within her. Perhaps, just perhaps, Ethan Kingsley was not the monster she had feared, but the ally she so desperately needed. Life with Ethan became a strange new normal. Elara continued to live in her own apartment, but he was a constant presence, calling her, visiting her, taking her out for quiet meals. He never pressured her, never demanded anything, yet his intentions were clear. He wanted her in his life, by his side. She remained guarded, the ghost of Nora, the shadow of her initial suspicions, still lingering between them. But his unwavering support, his quiet strength, his gentle persistence were slowly eroding her defenses. One evening, he invited her to a party at a friend's lavish villa. "It's informal," he assured her. "Just a few close friends. I'd like you to meet them." Alara, hesitant but curious, agreed. The villa was breathtaking, a modern architectural marvel overlooking the city. The guests were an eclectic mix of artists, entrepreneurs, and socialites, Ethan's inner circle. And among them, inevitably, was Vivian Holloway. Vivian, impeccably dressed and radiating confidence, seemed to be the unofficial hostess, her rapport with Ethan's friends easy and familiar. Alara felt a pang of inadequacy, a renewed awareness of the chasm that separated their worlds. Ethan, however, stayed close by her side, his hand possessively on her arm, his introductions warm and inclusive. He made a point of showcasing Alara's talent, mentioning her designs, her contributions to Zenith Corp. Vivian, observing them, her smile a little too bright, approached. "Alara, darling," she purred, "Ethan tells me you're designing a piece for his mother. Perhaps you could design something for me as well. I'm always looking for unique statement pieces." Before Alara could respond, Ethan interjected smoothly, "Perhaps, Vivian. But Alara's current focus is on my mother's commission and the summer collection. Her time is precious." The undercurrent of possessiveness in his tone was unmistakable. Later, as the party wound down, Ethan, slightly flushed from the wine, drew Alara aside. He led her out to a secluded balcony, the city lights twinkling below. "You're beautiful tonight, Alara," he murmured, his voice husky, his eyes dark with an emotion that made her heart skip a beat. He leaned in, his lips brushing hers, a tentative, questioning kiss that sent a jolt of electricity through her. Alara, caught off guard, her senses reeling from the wine and the intensity of his gaze, found herself responding, her lips parting under his, a silent surrender to the undeniable chemistry that crackled between them. The party had wound down, and Ethan, clearly having enjoyed the evening's festivities, was noticeably tipsy. He was charmingly insistent that Alara try a large platter of exotic fruits he'd procured, fussing over her like a mother hen, much to her amused embarrassment and the subtle, curious glances of the remaining guests. She found herself blushing under his overtly affectionate attention, a warmth spreading through her that had little to do with the wine. As they prepared to leave, Ethan swayed slightly, and Alara instinctively reached out to steady him. He leaned heavily on her, his arm around her shoulder, his familiar scent of sandalwood and bergamot, now mingled with the faint aroma of expensive wine, intoxicatingly close. "My chariot awaits, milady," he slurred playfully, gesturing vaguely towards where Ben usually materialized with the Rolls-Royce. However, tonight, he seemed to have made other arrangements. "We're staying here," he announced, his voice a low rumble against her ear. "My friend, he has guest suites, many guest suites." Ilara, half supporting his considerable frame, found herself being led not to a car, but up a winding staircase to a lavishly appointed suite overlooking the glittering cityscape. The room was opulent, yet possessed a certain masculine elegance that spoke of Ethan's own taste. He collapsed onto a plush sofa, pulling her down with him. For a moment, they just sat there, his head resting on her shoulder, his breathing soft and even. Then he tilted his head, his eyes dark and intense even in their inebriated state, searching hers. "Ilara," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently caressing her cheekbones, and then he kissed her. Not the tentative, questioning kiss from the balcony, but a deep, searing kiss that left her breathless, her mind reeling. It was a kiss of longing, of possession, of a vulnerability she hadn't expected from him. All her carefully constructed defenses, her doubts, her fears, seemed to melt away in the heat of that moment. It was her first truly profound kiss, a whirlwind of sensation and emotion that left her shaken and undeniably stirred. He pulled back slightly, his forehead resting against hers. "Stay with me tonight, Ilara," he murmured, his voice a plea. She knew what he was asking, and a part of her, the cautious, sensible part, screamed a warning. But another part, the part that had been starved for affection, for connection, the part that was undeniably drawn to this complex, enigmatic man, whispered yes. The first light of dawn was filtering through the sheer curtains when Ilara awoke, disoriented. She was in an unfamiliar bed, the scent of Ethan strong and comforting beside her. Memories of the previous night, hazy yet potent, flooded her senses. She turned to see him sleeping soundly, his usually severe features softened in repose, an almost boyish vulnerability etched on his face. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over her: tenderness, confusion, a touch of regret, and an undeniable burgeoning affection. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him, and found her clothes neatly folded on a chair. As she dressed, she caught her reflection in the mirror. There was a new softness in her eyes, a subtle flush on her cheeks. She looked different. When Ethan finally stirred, he found her sitting by the window, sipping a cup of coffee she'd found in the suite's kitchenette, gazing out at the awakening city. He came up behind her, his arms encircling her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice still husky with sleep. He nuzzled her neck, sending shivers down her spine. They shared a quiet breakfast, the previous night's intensity replaced by a comfortable, almost domestic intimacy. He was solicitous, attentive, his eyes never leaving hers. He drove her home, the silence in the car filled with unspoken emotions. As she stepped out of the Rolls-Royce, he caught her hand. "Dinner tonight?" he asked, his gaze earnest. Ilara hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Dinner," she agreed, a small smile playing on her lips. The world felt different, brighter, more vibrant. She was still Ilara Vance, the grieving sister, the ambitious designer. But now she was also Ilara Vance, the woman who had spent the night with Ethan Kingsley, the woman who was, despite her best judgment, falling for him. The upcoming exhibition, the culmination of months of hard work, suddenly felt less daunting. Her designs for the summer collection were bold, innovative, infused with a newfound passion. Ethan had sent a lavish bouquet of stargazer lilies to her office that morning, with a simple note, "For inspiration, EK." Her colleagues buzzed with speculation, but Ilara merely smiled, a secret warmth spreading through her. That evening, Ethan took her to a unique omakase restaurant, where the chef curated a personalized tasting menu for each guest. It was an extraordinary culinary experience, a testament to Ethan's sophisticated palate and his desire to share new experiences with her. After dinner, he led her to an exclusive jewelry boutique, one that Zenith Corp often collaborated with. "Choose whatever you like," he said, his gesture expansive. Ilara, overwhelmed by his generosity, initially demurred, but he was insistent. He selected several exquisite pieces for her: a delicate sapphire pendant, matching earrings, a stunning diamond tennis bracelet, his taste impeccable. From there, they moved to a high-fashion atelier, where he similarly insisted on buying her several designer outfits. Ilara, while grateful, felt a growing unease. His generosity was bordering on extravagance, and she worried about the implications, about the unspoken obligations that might come with such lavish gifts. But she said nothing, allowing herself for now to be swept along by his attentions, by the intoxicating allure of his world. Back in the quiet solitude of her apartment, Ilara carefully locked the door, shadow rubbing against her ankles, purring contentedly. She spread the newly acquired jewelry on her dresser, the gems glittering under the soft lamplight. They were beautiful, exquisite, a king's ransom. But did she deserve them? Did she deserve him? The questions echoed in the silence of her empty home. The industry conference and exhibition, held at a glamorous coastal resort, was a resounding success. Ilara's summer collection was a triumph, drawing rave reviews from critics and buyers alike. She found herself in the spotlight, introduced to influential designers, courted by wealthy patrons. It was exhilarating, intoxicating, a validation of her talent and hard work. After the main presentation, Ethan's mother, the elegant and formidable Mrs. Kingsley, sought her out. She was a woman of immense poise and understated power, her eyes sharp and intelligent. She praised Ilara's designs, her discerning taste evident in her astute observations. "Ilara," she said, her voice warm but firm, "your talent is undeniable. I would be honored if you would consider becoming my personal jewelry designer." It was an extraordinary offer, a mark of ultimate approval. Ilara, stunned, could only murmur her thanks. Later that evening, at a celebratory gala, Ilara, feeling overwhelmed by the attention and the whirlwind of events, slipped away from the crowd, seeking solace on the moonlit beach. The sound of the waves, the cool night air, the vast expanse of the starlit sky, it was a soothing balm to her frayed nerves. A familiar presence joined her. Ethan. He stood beside her, his tuxedo impeccable even after a long evening, a glass of champagne in his hand. He offered it to her, but she declined. He was slightly flushed, his eyes bright with a mixture of pride and something else, something deeper, more intense. He took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers. "You were magnificent tonight, Ilara," he said, his voice low and intimate. He drew her closer, his arm encircling her waist. "My brilliant, beautiful Ilara." He smelled of champagne and success and that familiar intoxicating scent of sandalwood and bergamot. As they walked back towards the resort, Vivian Holloway intercepted them, her smile dazzling, but her eyes holding a hint of something unreadable. "Ethan, darling, I was just leaving. Would you mind terribly giving me a lift back to my hotel?" Ethan's arm tightened around Ilara's waist. "I'm sorry, Vivian," he said, his voice coolly polite. "Ilara and I have other plans." Vivian's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she recovered. "Of course. Another time, then." She cast a lingering look at Ilara, a look that was both curious and subtly challenging, before disappearing into the night. In the privacy of their suite, the unspoken tension between Ilara and Ethan finally broke. He pulled her into his arms, his kiss urgent, demanding, a fusion of passion and possession. Ilara, her senses reeling, surrendered to him, to the undeniable force of their attraction. She was his, in that moment, completely and utterly. But even as she lost herself in his embrace, a small, persistent voice whispered in the back of her mind, a reminder of the shadows that still lingered, of the secrets that lay buried, of the uncertain future that stretched before them. For a while, life settled into a new rhythm. Ilara was, to all intents and purposes, Ethan's woman. He was attentive, passionate, fiercely protective. Yet a subtle distance remained. He was often away on business, his trips to Zenith Corp's international headquarters in London becoming more frequent. During one such absence, Ilara found herself comforting Chloe, who was nursing a broken heart after a messy breakup. Men, Chloe sighed dramatically over a bottle of wine at a local pub. They're impossible. Ilara, listening sympathetically, couldn't help but reflect on her own complicated relationship. She loved Ethan, she realized with a jolt of certainty. But their worlds were so different, their pasts so fraught with shadows. Could they truly build a future together? Later that evening, her phone rang. It was Ethan, his voice concerned. "Chloe just texted me. Said you were out drowning your sorrows with her. Are you all right, Ilara?" Ilara, slightly tipsy, giggled. "I'm fine, Ethan. Just girl talk." "Where are you?" he demanded, his tone brooking no argument. "I'm sending Ben to pick you up." He took her to a late-night supper at an exclusive restaurant, his concern for her evident in his solicitous attention. He listened patiently as she recounted Chloe's romantic woes, his expression softening with an unfamiliar tenderness. He took her back to his penthouse apartment, a place she was becoming increasingly familiar with. He undressed her gently, his touch sending shivers down her spine, and tucked her into his large, comfortable bed. He worked at his desk for a while, the soft glow of his laptop illuminating his focused expression, before finally joining her, his arm protectively around her. The next morning, as he was dressing for work, he casually mentioned an upcoming opportunity. "Zenith is sponsoring a week-long advanced design workshop in another city," he said. "It's a prestigious program, invitation only. I've arranged for you to attend. It'll be good for your career." And, he added, a faint smile playing on his lips, "it might give us both a little space." Ilara understood the unspoken message. Their relationship, while intense, was also demanding. A little time apart might be beneficial for both of them. She agreed, a mixture of excitement and trepidation filling her. The workshop would be a chance to hone her skills, to network with other talented designers, and, perhaps, to gain some clarity about her future with Ethan Kingsley. The week-long design workshop was held in a charming heritage hotel in a picturesque coastal town. Ilara found herself invigorated by the creative atmosphere, surrounded by talented peers, all eager to learn and innovate. She made a few new acquaintances, though she kept her personal life, particularly her relationship with Ethan, strictly private. One evening, as she was relaxing in her room, her phone rang. It was Ethan, his voice laced with a rare note of anxiety. "You had your phone on silent," he stated, more an accusation than a question. "I've been trying to reach you for hours." Ilara, flustered, apologized. "I was in a session. I didn't want to be disturbed." "I'm coming to get you," he announced. "We're having dinner." Despite her protests, he arrived an hour later, his presence filling her small hotel room, making it feel suddenly claustrophobic. He whisked her away to a quaint, family-run restaurant tucked away on a quiet side street, a far cry from their usual Michelin-starred haunts. The food was simple, home-style cooking, yet delicious. It reminded Ilara of Mrs. Gable's cooking, of a simpler, more innocent time. A wave of nostalgia, tinged with sadness, washed over her. After dinner, he didn't take her back to her modest hotel. Instead, he drove her to a luxurious 5-star resort overlooking the ocean, a place he apparently kept a permanent suite. He was attentive, solicitous, ensuring she had everything she needed. They shared a late-night snack of instant noodles, a surprisingly mundane indulgence for a man of his stature, and talked for hours, their conversation ranging from design philosophy to childhood memories. He worked late into the night, his laptop open, his brow furrowed in concentration, while Ilara watched him, a growing sense of tenderness, of belonging, filling her. He was a man of immense power, of ruthless ambition, yet he also possessed a surprising capacity for gentleness, for care. "Be my woman, Alara," he had said all those weeks ago. Now, looking at him, his guard down, his focus absolute, she realized, with a startling clarity, that she already was. The next morning, he drove her back to the Heritage Hotel where the workshop was being held, a lingering kiss at the door, a silent promise of his return. The workshop was progressing well, though a buzz of anticipation surrounded the late arrival of a key participant, Vivian Holloway, CEO of Chino Inc. Her presence, when she finally graced them with it, was like a minor royal visit. She was impeccably dressed, radiating an aura of effortless superiority, yet she made a token effort to mingle, her laughter a little too bright, her compliments a little too effusive. Alara, observing her, felt a familiar prickle of unease. Vivian, it seemed, was always a step behind, or perhaps a step ahead, in Ethan's orbit. That evening, after a particularly intense session, Alara returned to her room, exhausted but creatively stimulated. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "Come downstairs. I have a surprise for you." Intrigued, Alara freshened up and descended to the lobby. Ethan was waiting, a rare, almost boyish grin on his face. He led her not to his car, but to a private dining room in the hotel, a room she hadn't even known existed. It was breathtaking. The room was filled with flowers, her favorite stargazer lilies, soft candlelight flickering, a table set for two with exquisite china and crystal, a bottle of vintage champagne chilled in a silver bucket, and on a small side table, a beautifully decorated cake. "Happy birthday, Alara," Ethan murmured, his voice husky, his eyes shining with an emotion that made her heart melt. Alara stared at him, speechless. She had completely forgotten her own birthday, lost in the whirlwind of work, and her complicated relationship with him. Tears welled in her eyes. "You remembered," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Of course, I remembered," he said softly, cupping her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. The evening was magical. They drank champagne, savored an exquisite meal, and talked for hours, their conversation easy and intimate. Later, back in his luxurious suite at the nearby resort, their passion ignited, a fierce, tender culmination of all the unspoken emotions that had been simmering between them. They made love with a desperate, hungry intensity, a fusion of bodies and souls that left them both breathless and spent. As Alara lay tangled in his arms, the scent of him, the feel of his skin against hers, a profound sense of peace settled over her. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly happy, truly cherished. The next morning, she awoke late, her body pleasantly sore, her mind still hazy from the previous night's indulgence. Ethan was already up, dressed, a cup of coffee in his hand. "I've called the workshop," he said, his voice gentle. "Told them you're unwell. You need to rest today." Ilara, too blissfully content to argue, merely nodded, a soft smile playing on her lips. He was taking care of her in every way, and for now, that was all that mattered. Returning to the workshop the following day, rested but still with a lingering glow from her birthday celebration with Ethan, Alara found the atmosphere subtly altered. Her colleagues, who had previously been friendly and collaborative, now seemed distant, their glances furtive, their whispers ceasing abruptly when she approached. Ched. A cold knot of dread formed in her stomach. During a coffee break, she overheard snippets of a conversation, hushed but venomous. Saw her leaving the five-star resort with him? Always knew there was something going on. Using her looks to get ahead. Glorified call girl. The words, ugly and vicious, struck Alara like physical blows. They were talking about her, about Ethan. The story had twisted, mutated into something sordid and demeaning. She felt a wave of nausea, her face burning with shame and anger. She was being ostracized, judged, condemned. The rest of the day was a torment. Every smile seemed like a smirk, every whisper a condemnation. She felt isolated, alone, the camaraderie of the workshop replaced by a chilling wall of suspicion and disdain. Even Mr. Kwan, her usually jovial department head, who was also attending the workshop, seemed to regard her with a new, unwelcome curiosity. That evening, back in the sterile anonymity of her hotel room, Elara broke down, the tears she had been holding back all day, finally flowing freely. Ethan, when he called, sensed her distress immediately. "What's wrong, Elara?" he demanded, his voice sharp with concern. Sobbing, she recounted the whispers, the accusations, the shameful label of kept woman that had been branded upon her. There was a dangerous silence on the other end of the line. Then Ethan spoke, his voice deceptively calm, yet laced with a chilling fury. "Stay in your room, Elara. I'll handle this." The next morning, the atmosphere at the workshop was electric. An emergency meeting had been called. Ethan Kingsley, in all his formidable icy glory, was present. He addressed the assembled designers, his voice quiet but resonant with an authority that brooked no dissent. "It has come to my attention," he began, his gaze sweeping across the room, "that certain malicious and unfounded rumors have been circulating regarding Miss Elara Vance, one of Zenith Corp's most valued designers." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Let me be unequivocally clear. Ms. Vance was indeed at the resort you mentioned. She was there at my invitation to discuss a highly confidential design project for my mother, a project of immense personal and professional significance. Given the late hour of our discussions, I arranged for her to stay in the presidential suite. Her integrity is beyond reproach. Her talent is undeniable." He then turned his attention to the workshop organizers. "I expect a full and public apology to Ms. Vance. Furthermore, I have identified the individuals responsible for initiating and perpetuating these baseless slanders. Their participation in this workshop is terminated, effective immediately, and their careers in this industry," he added, his voice dropping to a dangerously soft level, "will be re-evaluated." A stunned silence filled the room. Mr. Kwan, looking pale and shaken, quickly stepped forward, offering a profuse apology to Elara, his earlier curiosity replaced by a newfound respect, bordering on fear. The individuals responsible for the rumors, their faces ashen, were quietly escorted from the premises. The message was clear. Elara Vance was under Ethan Kingsley's protection, and he would tolerate no slight, no insult directed towards her. Elara, watching him, felt a surge of gratitude, of awe, of a fierce, protective love. He was her champion, her defender, her avenging angel. The air in the workshop cleared, almost literally, after Ethan's decisive intervention. The remaining participants, chastened and perhaps a little awestruck, treated Elara with a newfound, almost deferential respect. The whispers ceased, replaced by a cautious admiration. Yet, Elara couldn't shake off a lingering sense of unease. She had been publicly vindicated, her reputation restored, but the incident had left a bitter taste in her mouth. She felt exposed, vulnerable, her private life laid bare for public consumption. During a quiet lunch at a nearby cafe, Vivian Holloway approached her table. Elara tensed, expecting another veiled barb, another subtle power play. But Vivian's expression was surprisingly neutral. "I heard what happened," Vivian said, her voice devoid of its usual artifice. "For what it's worth, Elara, I never believed those ridiculous rumors. You're too earnest for that kind of game." Elara, taken aback by this unexpected show of solidarity, merely nodded. "Thank you, Vivian." "We're not so different, you and I," Vivian continued, a wry smile playing on her lips. We both navigate a world dominated by powerful men. We both have our ambitions. I'm here at this workshop for the same reason you are, to hone my craft, to create something beautiful. In my case, she added, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. It's a piece for someone important to me. The admission, so personal, so unexpected, took Ilara by surprise. Perhaps Vivian Holloway was more complex, more human than she had initially perceived. That evening, Ethan arrived at Ilara's hotel room later than usual, his face etched with fatigue. He said little, merely drew her into his arms, his embrace tight, possessive. He stayed the night, their lovemaking a fierce, almost desperate affirmation of their connection, a silent reassurance that they were a united front against the world. Ilara, nestled in his arms, felt a sense of security, of belonging, that she hadn't thought possible. Yet, even as she drifted off to sleep, a small, persistent voice whispered in the back of her mind, a reminder of the precariousness of her happiness, of the vast, often treacherous chasm that separated her world from Ethan Kingsley's. The workshop concluded, and Ilara presented her final designs to Ethan. He was impressed, his praise genuine and effusive. "You have a rare gift, Ilara," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "This collection will be a triumph." Back at Zenith Corp, the atmosphere was subtly different. The rumors had inevitably reached the home office, but Ethan's swift, decisive action had quelled any overt gossip. Yet Ilara could still feel the curious glances, the hushed whispers, the unspoken questions. Some colleagues, like Chloe, remained steadfastly loyal, their support a comforting reassurance. Others, however, regarded her with a mixture of envy and suspicion, their smiles a little too bright, their compliments a little too effusive. She was Ethan Kingsley's woman, and that, it seemed, was a double-edged sword. One afternoon, Mrs. Kingsley, Ethan's mother, paid an unexpected visit to Zenith Corp. She sought Ilara out, her expression warm and gracious. "My dear Ilara," she said, taking Ilara's hands in hers, "I wanted to thank you personally. The birthday gift you designed, it's exquisite, truly a work of art. You have a remarkable talent." Her praise, so genuine, so heartfelt, brought tears to Ilara's eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Kingsley," Ilara whispered. "It was an honor." "Nonsense, my dear," Mrs. Kingsley replied, her smile kind. "The honor was all mine, and please call me Eleanor." Later that evening, Ethan took Ilara to dinner to celebrate. "My mother adores you," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "And she's not easily impressed." He seemed relieved, almost boyishly pleased, by his mother's approval. That night, he drove her home, but instead of leaving her at the door, he walked her inside. He lingered, his gaze taking in the modest apartment, the familiar scent of home that clung to the air. He found the small, framed photograph of Nora on Ilara's nightstand and picked it up, his expression unreadable. "She was beautiful," he said softly. "Tell me about her." And so, Ilara did. She spoke of Nora's laughter, her dreams, her vibrant spirit. She spoke of the void Nora's death had left, of the gnawing pain that still consumed her. Ethan listened in silence, his hand gently stroking her hair, his presence a quiet comfort in the darkness. Late that night, after Ilara had fallen asleep, exhausted but strangely at peace, Ethan slipped out of the apartment. He returned a short while later, carrying a small, beautifully wrapped gift. He placed it on her nightstand, beside Nora's photograph, a silent offering in the stillness of the night. The next morning, Ilara awoke to find the gift. It was a luxurious set of skincare products, the kind she would never dream of buying for herself. Tucked inside was a small card in Ethan's elegant handwriting. For your beautiful skin. Take care of yourself, Alara. E.K. The gesture, so thoughtful, so personal, brought a fresh wave of tears to her eyes. He saw her, truly saw her, not just as a designer, not just as his lover, but as a woman, with all her vulnerabilities, her grief, her quiet strength. At Zenith Corp, Alara was appointed lead designer for a major charity gala, a high-profile event that would showcase Zenith's commitment to corporate social responsibility. It was a significant undertaking, a testament to her growing reputation within the company. But with increased visibility came increased scrutiny. Some colleagues, their envy thinly veiled, whispered that her rapid rise was due solely to her relationship with Ethan. One older designer, a bitter, resentful woman named Martha, confronted Alara openly in the break room. "You think you're so special, don't you?" Martha sneered, her voice dripping with malice. "Flaunting your fancy gifts, your powerful protector. Some of us have worked here for years, relying on talent, not other assets." Alara, stung by the viciousness of the attack, tried to remain composed. "My work speaks for itself, Martha," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "And my personal life is none of your concern." "Oh, isn't it?" Martha retorted, her eyes blazing. "When the CEO's little pet gets all the plum assignments, it becomes everyone's concern." "What about your family, dear?" "Oh, that's right. You don't have much of one left, do you? A murdered sister, a dead gray, in mother. Tragic. Or perhaps convenient?" The cruelty of her words, the casual, callous dismissal of Alara's profound grief, struck Alara like a physical blow. Tears welled in her eyes, her carefully constructed composure crumbling. Just as Martha was about to deliver another verbal volley, a voice, cold as ice, cut through the air. "That's enough, Martha." Ethan Kingsley stood in the doorway, his expression thunderous, his eyes blazing with a fury that made Martha visibly recoil. "You will apologize to Ms. Vance immediately, and then you will clear out your desk. Your employment at Zenith Corp is terminated, effective now." Martha, her face ashen, stammered an apology, her earlier bravado completely extinguished. She scurried away, her career at Zenith in tatters. Ethan strode towards Alara, his expression softening as he reached her. He gently wiped away her tears, his touch surprisingly tender. "No one will ever speak to you like that again, Alara," he said, his voice low and fierce. "I won't allow it." That evening, he invited her to dinner at his family's estate, a sprawling mansion in the most exclusive part of the city. "It's time you met my parents properly," he said, his tone casual, but his eyes holding a hint of nervousness. "And I want them to meet you." The Kingsley estate was a world unto itself, a realm of old money, understated elegance, and formidable power. Ethan's father, Mr. Towan Kingsley, was a distinguished silver-haired patriarch, his demeanor reserved but not unkind. His mother, Eleanor, greeted Alara with genuine warmth, her earlier approval now solidified into a welcoming embrace. Dinner was a surprisingly relaxed affair, the conversation flowing easily, the atmosphere warm and inclusive. Alara found herself charmed by their quiet intelligence, their genuine interest in her work, her life. But as the evening progressed, another figure joined them. Ethan's younger brother, Theodore, or Theo as he preferred. Theo Kingsley was a stark contrast to his older brother. Where Ethan was cool, composed, and understated, Theo was flamboyant, brash, and overtly charming. He was handsome, in a roguish, almost predatory way, his eyes holding a mischievous glint. And as Alara looked at him, at his profile, at the way he held his head, A chilling sense of déjà vu washed over her. It wasn't Ethan. It was Theodore. Theo Kingsley was the man in the police photograph, the man who had been near the scene of Nora's murder. The realization struck Alara with the force of a physical blow, stealing her breath, her carefully constructed composure shattering like fragile glass. Theo Kingsley, not Ethan. Her world tilted. The opulent dining room, the polite conversation, the concerned faces of Ethan's parents. It all receded, replaced by a roaring in her ears, a sickening wave of nausea. She had been so wrong, so tragically, catastrophically wrong. For months, she had harbored a dark suspicion against Ethan, the man who had shown her nothing but kindness, support, and a growing, undeniable affection. And all along, the true face of her potential tormentor had been hidden in plain sight, a charming, roguish younger brother. Guilt, sharp and suffocating, mingled with a fresh wave of terror. Theo, oblivious to her inner turmoil, was regaling the table with an amusing anecdote, his laughter echoing in the suddenly cavernous room. Alara's gaze was drawn to him, a morbid fascination compelling her to study his features, the curve of his jaw, the slight arrogance in his smile. It was him. There was no doubt. How could she have been so blind? Eleanor Kingsley, noticing Ilara's sudden pallor, her trembling hands, reached out with concern. "My dear, are you all right? You look a little unwell." Alara forced a weak smile, her mind racing. I'm just a little tired, Eleanor. It's been a long day." Ethan's eyes, sharp and perceptive, were fixed on her, a question in their depths. He knew something was wrong, terribly wrong. After dinner, as Ethan drove her home, the silence in the car was thick with unspoken tension. "Ilara, what happened back there?" he asked, his voice low, concerned. "You looked like you'd seen a ghost." Ilara couldn't bring herself to tell him, not yet. The revelation was too raw, too shocking. How could she tell him that she suspected his own brother of involvement in Nora's murder? The implications were horrifying, unthinkable. I just felt a little overwhelmed," she lied, hating the deceit, hating the fear that was once again coiling around her heart. He didn't press her, but she could feel his worried gaze on her throughout the drive. Back in the solitude of her apartment, Ilara paced restlessly, her mind a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. She had to act. She couldn't let this new, horrifying suspicion fester. The next morning, with trembling hands, she retrieved the grainy photograph she had kept hidden away. This time, she focused not on Ethan, but on Theo. The resemblance, now that she knew what to look for, was undeniable. She made another anonymous call to the police, her voice disguised, her message brief and to the point. "Look into Theodore Kingsley. He was near the scene of Nora Vance's murder." The days that followed were a torment. Ilara lived in a state of heightened anxiety, her every interaction with Ethan tainted by her terrible secret. He was attentive, caring, his concern for her well-being palpable. He sensed her distress, her withdrawal, but he didn't push, patiently waiting for her to confide in him. His kindness, his unwavering support, only amplified her guilt. How could she have ever suspected him? How could she now harbor such a monstrous suspicion against his own flesh and blood? One evening, needing a distraction, a semblance of normalcy, Ilara agreed to join Chloe and a few other colleagues for karaoke. The loud music, the off-key singing, the forced joviality. It was a temporary reprieve from the darkness that threatened to consume her. As she was belting out a power ballad, her voice surprisingly strong, she saw him, Theo Kingsley. He was at a nearby table, a beautiful, giggling young woman draped on his arm. He caught Ilara's eye, a slow, knowing smile spreading across his handsome face. He raised his glass in a mock toast, his gaze lingering on her with an unnerving intensity. Ilara's blood ran cold. Later, as she was leaving the karaoke bar, a group of drunken louts accosted her, their words crude, their intentions menacing. Fear, sharp and primal, clawed at her throat. She tried to push past them, but they blocked her path, their leering faces closing in. Just as one of them reached for her, a figure materialized out of the darkness. Ethan. His face was a mask of cold fury. With swift, brutal efficiency, he dispatched the drunken thugs, his movements precise, economical, utterly lethal. He pulled Ilara into his arms, his body trembling with a protective rage. "Are you all right?" he demanded, his voice hoarse, his eyes blazing. Ilara, shaken but unharmed, could only nod, burying her face in his chest, clinging to him as if he were her only anchor in a storm-tossed sea. He held her tightly, his embrace a haven of safety and strength. As he led her to his car, his arm possessively around her, she saw Theo watching them from the shadows, his expression unreadable, a faint, enigmatic smile playing on his lips. The drive back to Ethan's penthouse was mostly silent, the adrenaline from the encounter slowly ebbing, leaving Ilara feeling drained and vulnerable. Ethan, however, was still simmering with a controlled fury. He fussed over the faint red marks on her wrist, where one of the thugs had grabbed her, his touch surprisingly gentle, despite the anger that still radiated from him. "You need to be more careful, Ilara," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "This city, it can be dangerous." In the sanctuary of his apartment, he drew her a hot bath, lacing it with soothing oils. He then proceeded to make her a bowl of his signature instant noodles, a surprisingly comforting ritual that had become a staple of their quiet evenings together. As they ate, sitting cross-legged on the plush living room rug, the tension between them slowly dissipated, replaced by a familiar intimacy. "I've been thinking, Ilara," Ethan said, his voice serious. "Perhaps it's time you moved in with me. Permanently." Ilara looked at him, surprised. The thought of living with him, of sharing his life in such a tangible way, was both alluring and terrifying. I don't know, Ethan," she stammered. "It's a big step." "I want to take care of you, Ilara," he said, his gaze earnest. "I want to protect you. And," he added, a faint smile playing on his lips, "I happen to be an excellent cook. My noodle recipe is legendary." Ilara laughed, a genuine, heartfelt laugh that seemed to chase away some of the lingering shadows. "Is that your main selling point?" "Among others," he replied, his eyes twinkling. That night, Ilara slept in his arms, a profound sense of peace settling over her. The world outside, with its dangers and its uncertainties, seemed to recede, held at bay by the strength of his embrace, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. The next morning, she returned to her own apartment to gather some clothes, her mind still grappling with Ethan's proposal. The thought of leaving her small, familiar space, the last tangible link to her past, to Nora, to Mrs. Gable, was daunting. Yet the prospect of building a future with Ethan, of sharing his life, his home, filled her with a tentative, burgeoning hope. At Zenith Corp, Ilara threw herself into her latest project, designing a signature collection for a major fundraising event. The work was demanding, requiring all her focus and creativity. Chloe, ever supportive, offered words of encouragement. "You're on fire, Ilara. This collection is going to be a sensation." During a coffee break, Ilara had an unwelcome encounter with Theo Kingsley. He cornered her by the elevator, his demeanor overtly flirtatious, his compliments laced with a suggestive undertone that made her skin crawl. "Ilara, darling," he purred, his eyes raking over her appreciatively. "You look ravishing today. We should get together sometime, you and I. Discuss design philosophy. Elara recoiled. Her earlier fear now mingled with a profound sense of revulsion. I'm busy, Theo, she said, her voice cold. And I'm not interested. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second before he recovered his brash composure. Playing hard to get, are we? I like a challenge. He stepped into the elevator with her, his presence oppressive, his cologne cloying. He continued his unwelcome advances, boasting about his conquests, his extravagant lifestyle, all the while eyeing her with a predatory gleam. Elara endured his obnoxious monologue in stony silence, her heart pounding with a mixture of anger and trepidation. When the elevator finally reached her floor, she practically fled, eager to escape his suffocating presence. Later that day, she saw Theo entering Ethan's office, his expression a mixture of anxiety and entitlement. He was clearly seeking his older brother's help, his usual arrogance momentarily eclipsed by a hint of desperation. Ethan, however, remained focused on his work, his demeanor cool, professional, offering little comfort to his wayward younger sibling. The brief, unsettling encounter with Theo only solidified Ilara's resolve. She needed to know the truth about Nora's murder, and she suspected Theo Kingsley held the key. But how could she uncover it without endangering herself or her fragile, burgeoning relationship with Ethan? The weight of her secret, her suspicion of Theo, pressed heavily on Ilara. She found herself increasingly withdrawn, her nights plagued by nightmares, her days filled with a gnawing anxiety. Ethan, perceptive as ever, noticed her distress. "Talk to me, Ilara," he urged, his voice gentle but firm. "What's troubling you?" Finally, unable to bear the burden any longer, Ilara confessed. She told him about her chilling realization at the Kingsley family dinner, about Theo's uncanny resemblance to the man in the police photograph, about her renewed fear that Theo was somehow involved in Nora's murder. Ethan listened in stunned silence, his face paling, his expression a mixture of disbelief and a dawning horror. The thought that his own brother, however reckless and irresponsible, could be capable of such a heinous crime was clearly devastating. "Theo?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "It can't be." But Ilara's conviction, her quiet certainty, was hard to dismiss. "I saw him, Ethan," she insisted, her voice trembling. "Near the karaoke bar, the night I was attacked. He was watching me. There's something wrong about him." Ethan, visibly shaken, ran a hand through his hair. I need to think," he said, his voice barely audible. He retreated into his study, the door closing behind him with a soft, ominous click. Ilara waited, her heart pounding, her mind racing. Hours later, he emerged, his face grim, his eyes shadowed. "I spoke to Theo," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. He admitted to being in the vicinity of your sister's university that night. He claims he was meeting someone, a girl. He denies any involvement in Nora's death." "Do you believe him?" Ilara asked, her gaze searching his. Ethan hesitated. "I don't know what to believe, Ilara," he confessed, his voice raw with pain. "He's my brother, but I also know he's capable of incredible stupidity, of reckless, self-destructive behavior." He paused, his gaze meeting hers, a new resolve hardening his features. "But I promise you this, Ilara, I will find out the truth, whatever it takes. For Nora, and for you." His words, so solemn, so sincere, brought a fresh wave of tears to Ilara's eyes. He was choosing her, choosing justice, even if it meant confronting a horrifying truth about his own family. In the days that followed, Ethan launched his own discreet investigation into Theo's activities. He hired private investigators, utilized his extensive network of contacts, his determination unwavering. Ilara, meanwhile, tried to focus on her work, her anxiety somewhat alleviated by Ethan's unwavering support. He insisted she move into his penthouse, his protective instincts now fully engaged. "I need you where I can see you, Ilara," he said, his voice firm. "Where I know you're safe." And so Ilara packed her meager belongings, her heart a mixture of trepidation and a fragile, burgeoning hope. She brought Shadow, her beloved stray cat, who, much to her surprise, adapted quickly to the opulent surroundings, staking out a favored spot on a sun-drenched windowsill overlooking the city. Life in Ethan's penthouse was a strange new reality. The vast, empty spaces, the minimalist luxury, the breathtaking views. It was a world away from her small, cluttered apartment. Yet, with Ethan by her side, it began to feel like home. He was attentive, caring, his presence a constant source of comfort and strength. He cooked for her, simple, delicious meals that reminded her of a normalcy she had almost forgotten. He held her close at night, his embrace a bulwark against the darkness that still threatened to engulf her. Slowly, tentatively, Ilara began to heal. The raw edges of her grief softened, replaced by a quiet determination to see justice done for Nora. And her love for Ethan, a love born in the crucible of shared sorrow and suspicion, deepened, solidified, becoming an undeniable force in her life. The investigation into Theo's activities yielded disturbing results. He was, it turned out, entangled in a web of gambling debts, shady associates, and a string of casual, often exploitative relationships. There was also a connection, tenuous but troubling, to a shadowy underground network involved in extortion and intimidation. Ethan, his face grim, shared the findings with Ilara. "It seems my brother has been leading a double life," he said, his voice heavy with a mixture of anger and disappointment. "But there's still no concrete evidence linking him directly to Nora's murder." Just as their hopes began to falter, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Vivian Holloway. She contacted Ethan, her voice urgent, requesting an immediate meeting. They met at a discreet private club, Ilara accompanying Ethan, her presence a silent testament to their united front. Vivian, her usual composure shaken, her face pale and drawn, confessed a horrifying secret. Her younger sister, Iris, a university student, had recently confided in her about a traumatic experience. Iris had been targeted by a predatory group operating on campus, a group known for blackmailing and intimidating vulnerable students. And the ringleader, the charming, manipulative figure who had lured Iris into their web, was none other than Theo Kingsley. Vivian, her voice trembling with a mixture of shame and fury, revealed that Iris had been present at a party where another young woman, a classmate of Iris's, had been drugged and assaulted. That young woman was Nora Vance. Iris, terrified of Theo's retribution, had kept silent, her guilt a festering wound. But the news of Nora's subsequent death, and Vivian's own growing unease about Theo's increasingly erratic behavior, had finally compelled her to speak out. Vivian, driven by a desperate need to protect her sister and to see justice done, had gathered evidence, incriminating text messages, surreptitious recordings, witness testimonies from other victims, all pointing to Theo's guilt. She handed Ethan a thick file, her hands trembling. "He's a monster, Ethan," she whispered, her voice raw with emotion. "He needs to be stopped." Ethan, his face a mask of cold fury, took the file. The evidence was damning, irrefutable. Theo, his own brother, was not just reckless and irresponsible. He was a predator, a criminal, capable of unimaginable cruelty. The realization was a devastating blow, yet it also brought a chilling clarity. They now had the proof they needed. Working with Vivian and her legal team, Ethan meticulously compiled the evidence, preparing an airtight case against Theo. He then made the most difficult phone call of his life, contacting his parents, gently but firmly informing them of Theo's monstrous actions, of the undeniable proof of his guilt. The Kingsleys were devastated, their world shattered by the revelation of their younger son's depravity. But to their credit, they did not try to shield him, did not attempt to use their immense wealth and influence to obstruct justice. Their grief was profound, but their commitment to righteousness, however painful, was unwavering. With the evidence in hand, Ethan and Ilara, accompanied by Vivian and her sister Iris, went to the police. The jaded detective who had once dismissed Ilara's concerns now listened with rapt attention, his expression shifting from skepticism to a grim understanding as the horrifying truth unfolded. Theo Kingsley was arrested later that day, his charming facade crumbling to reveal the frightened, pathetic creature beneath. The subsequent trial was a media sensation. The sordid details of Theo's crimes splashed across headlines, a horrifying testament to the darkness that can lurk beneath a veneer of privilege and charm. Iris Holloway, her voice trembling but resolute, testified against him, her courage inspiring other victims to come forward. Ilara, too, found the strength to face her sister's killer in court, her gaze unwavering, her quiet dignity a powerful indictment of his depravity. The verdict, when it finally came, was a relief, a vindication, a small measure of justice in a world that had seemed so devoid of it. Theo Kingsley was found guilty, sentenced to a lengthy prison term, his life of privilege and predation brought to an abrupt and ignominious end. As Ilara stood outside the courtroom, the weight of months, of Yoi, ours, of grief and suspicion finally lifting from her shoulders, Ethan was there, his arm around her, his presence a steadfast anchor. They had faced the darkness together and emerged, scarred but not broken, into the light. The aftermath of the trial was a period of quiet healing. Ilara, with Ethan's unwavering support, began to rebuild her life, piece by fragile piece. She continued her work at Zenith Corp., her designs imbued with a newfound depth and maturity. Her talent, once overshadowed by grief and suspicion, now shone brightly, earning her accolades and recognition within the industry. She and Ethan moved into a new home, a beautiful townhouse overlooking a quiet park, a space filled with light and laughter, a sanctuary where they could build their future together. Shadow, their beloved cat, lorded over his new domain, a furry, purring symbol of their domestic bliss. One crisp autumn afternoon, as they walked hand in hand through the park, the golden leaves crunching underfoot, Ethan stopped, turning to face Ilara. He knelt before her, his eyes shining with an emotion that made her heart soar. He produced a small velvet box, and inside, nestled on a bed of satin, was the most exquisite diamond ring Ilara had ever seen. "Ilara Vance," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you are the strongest, most courageous, most beautiful woman I have ever known. You have faced unimaginable darkness and emerged with grace, with dignity, with an unwavering commitment to truth and justice. You have taught me the meaning of love, of loyalty, of unwavering support. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears streamed down Ilara's face, tears of joy, of relief, of a profound, overwhelming love. "Yes, Ethan," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Their wedding, held a few months later, was an intimate affair, attended by close friends and family. Eleanor and Toan Kingsley, their faces etched with a quiet sorrow for their lost son, but also a genuine joy for Ethan's newfound happiness, welcomed Ilara into their family with open arms. Vivian Holloway, her own demons laid to rest, her sister safe and healing, attended the ceremony, a genuine smile gracing her lips as she wished the couple a lifetime of happiness. Chloe, of course, was Ilara's maid of honor, her bubbly enthusiasm a welcome counterpoint to the solemnity of the occasion. As Ilara stood before Ethan, exchanging vows, her heart overflowed with a love so profound, so encompassing, it seemed to fill the entire universe. She thought of Nora, of Mrs. Gable. Their spirits, she knew, were with her, smiling down on her, their love a guiding star in her life. And she knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within her soul, that this was her happily ever after, a love story forged in the crucible of sorrow, tempered by suspicion, and ultimately redeemed by truth, by justice, and by an unwavering, unconditional love. 3 years slipped by, each one a testament to the quiet joy and deepening bond between Ilara and Ethan. Zenith Corp, under Ethan's astute leadership, and with Ilara's increasingly influential design direction, flourished. Ethan, once the aloof and enigmatic CEO, had softened, his innate warmth, previously reserved for Ilara, now extending to his employees, fostering a culture of respect and creativity. He was still a formidable businessman, but the icy exterior had melted, revealing the compassionate heart beneath. Theo remained incarcerated, a distant, painful memory, a reminder of the darkness they had overcome. The Kingsley family, though forever scarred by his actions, had found a way to heal, their focus shifting to the bright future Ethan and Ilara were building. Ilara herself had blossomed. The shadows of grief had receded, replaced by a quiet confidence, a radiant happiness that illuminated her from within. She was a respected designer, a cherished wife, and soon she would embrace a new role. Mother. One spring morning, as the city awakened to the promise of a new day, Ilara shared her secret with Ethan. He had been overjoyed, his reaction a mixture of stunned disbelief and unadulterated elation. He had fussed over her endlessly, his protective instincts kicking into overdrive, his tenderness a constant source of comfort and amusement. Their son, Leo Kingsley, arrived on a crisp autumn day, a perfect tiny replica of his father, with Ilara's expressive eyes. He filled their home with a new kind of love, a love so fierce, so overwhelming, it took their breath away. Ilara watched Ethan with their son, his usually serious features softened into an expression of pure adoration as he cradled Leo in his arms, his deep voice murmuring nonsensical lullabies. In those moments, her heart swelled with a gratitude so profound, it brought tears to her eyes. She had found her safe harbor, her forever love, her family. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Leo asleep in his bassinet, shadow purring content. Deadly at their feet, Ilara leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder. "Do you ever think about it?" she asked softly. "About how we started, about all the suspicion, the fear." Ethan's arm tightened around her. "Sometimes," he admitted, his voice a low rumble. "But then I look at you, at Leo, at this life we've built together, and all I feel is gratitude. You were right to be suspicious, Ilara. You were right to fight for Nora. Your strength, your integrity, it's what I fell in love with." He tilted her chin up, his gaze meeting hers, his eyes filled with an unwavering love. "You are my everything, Ilara Kingsley. My wife, my partner, the mother of my child, my salvation." He kissed her then, a slow, tender kiss that spoke of shared history, of battles won, of a love that had weathered the darkest of storms and emerged stronger, brighter, more resilient than ever. And as the firelight danced, casting a warm glow over their peaceful home, Ilara knew, with every fiber of her being, that this was not just a happy ending, but a beautiful, enduring beginning. Their journey had been fraught with peril, with heartbreak, with unimaginable challenges. But through it all, they had found their way back to each other, their love a beacon of hope in the darkness, a testament to the enduring power of truth, of justice, and of a love that was, quite simply, meant to be.